Why are investors so seemingly unhappy with this report?
I think it's hard for me to say why investors are seemingly so unhappy with this report. But I think one of the things that I look at more broadly is it's their it's not the big quarter. They got product out even though consumers could order products. There were still a lot of delays in shipping products. They just announced a new tablet lineup last week. So I think, the third quarter, whatever, that quarter is going to be what it's going to be. But I think, what's really important for every consumer electronics manufacturer is, the holiday season. And that's what we've got to look forward to. And that's, what's most important for them in the rest of the year.
So let's talk about that. Some words from Tim Cook here. He says, as we head into the holiday season with our most powerful lineup ever, we're leading with our values in every action we take and every decision we make. We're deeply committed to protecting the environment, securing user privacy, strengthening accessibility, and creating products and services that can unlock humanity's full creative potential. When you look at the product lineup, what's available this holiday season, the way that they're keeping, many of the prices the same, how optimistic are you that they're going to be able to move a lot of product?
So, I do have some optimism. We just put out, Forrester just put out their holiday forecast, and we're forecasting an increase in online spend of about 14.6%. When we've surveyed consumers, we have 18% of consumers saying they're going to spend more this year than last year. On the flip side, we still have about 40% saying that they're going to spend less. When we talk to consumers about how they're feeling about the economic headwinds, we do have, depending on the question that you ask, between like 39 and 41% of U.S. online consumers saying, I'm delaying making purchases. I am worried about the economy. There are things that I'm going to pull back on. And then, just not making purchases they want to make. And then if you ask them just kind of the sentiment of how they're doing, there's probably about 50% of them that are worried about the economy, worried about their money, and definitely, expect to slow down purchasing this holiday season. So I think it's, going to be a question of, what is that mix? Is that 18%, the affluent 18% that Apple relies on year in and year out? But I think it's, it's still going to be a good holiday season, but it may not be what everybody wanted it to be. If we were to look at the forecast from earlier in the year, it's going to be a tough season.
Meantime, China has historically been a huge market for Apple. Tim Cook was really the architect of Apple's China strategy, and we're in the middle of a potentially history-making decoupling of the U.S. and China. How is Apple handling that, and how much will that impact or potentially hurt Apple over the longer term?
Yeah, so I think that's always a hard question, Emily, because I think always, the devil is in the details. I think one of the things that's been interesting about watching China from a consumer standpoint, which is closer to what I follow, is the Chinese are still far more locked down than we are here in the United States and than we are in Europe. And so there is more consumption of, online media, virtual worlds. We're seeing far more interest in things like the metaverse and streaming media and things that keep them entertained at home. So I think it's hard for me to say, what's going to happen in China, but it's a very different environment that we have here in the U.S. in terms of, like I said, our mobility and how much we're depending on media and electronics and so forth to keep us entertained, to continue to work, stay in touch with our friends and family and so forth. So it'll be interesting to watch.
Meantime, I have to ask you about the controversy, changes in Apple's ad tracking policies, Meta hitting back this week with how much it's hurting them and other social media companies. You've got the skeptics and the critics out there saying that Apple isn't doing this to protect privacy or security, but to add to Apple's own bottom line. What's your take?
So, there's a little bit of both, but I don't know that anyone's crying for Apple or Google's diminished ability to monetize the data of consumers, right? Those companies have grown very, very wealthy over the past couple of decades by doing so. And I think as we look forward and we're looking at the values that consumers have, Tim Cook really hits on them one after the other. It is about our privacy. It is about security. It is about responsibility. It is about the environment. It is about trust. And if we look at some of the biggest themes that our clients are asking about, it's all of those. It's trust. It's the economy. It's the green, it's being green. It's security. It's privacy and so forth. And I think that's really the long game. Do I think that advertising is going to contribute in a substantial way to Apple's bottom line in the next 5 years? I'd be surprised if they break out that revenue. I'd be surprised if it gets to be that big.